Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Emily. So this hashtag, Atlanta Data Analytics, that I just need it. That is a long hashtag. Who are our tweeters? I just want to extend an apology to all of those who are really tweeting, because that that takes a lot out of the 140 characters. So I'm just sending a little signal here. I just want to start here for a minute and go out to all of you here. I was talking to, it's Tessia? Dacia Garner with the Bureau of Labor BLS. It's early, and I haven't had enough Pete's. But I wanted to start this morning with you before we're going to have a lot of sessions here today. And I'm interested, I mean, this is a packed house on data analytics in Washington, D.C. at sort of 8 in the morning. So what question is burning with you that you'd most like to get answered today? Because I'm going to come back to that several times. I have no idea what she's going to say, but what's your zinger question?
I want to know how we can prepare the students today for their careers tomorrow in this field, and not just in computer science, but all across, like economics, biology, history. I think it's going to inundate the entire field of education.
That's great. So that's the entire subject of panel 2, so don't go away. And Brian is at GW University here. I can say that. Brian, what's your big question?
I help manage the data science program at GW, and one of the things that we struggle with is...
So what are you failing in?
Not that I hope my students are passing everything, but I'm not sure. So one of the things we struggle with is bringing in new technologies in the classroom to kind of keep up with the pace of what's going on in the industry. Specifically, one of the things we're trying to do is bring in more technologies focused on streaming data. So if you guys could talk about, IoT and real-time data analysis and the tools used for streaming.
I think that's a Marco thing. We'll be right back to that. And Mary Dunaway from the University of Virginia.
Yes, I'm Director of Data Science Programs in the College of Continuing Professional Studies, and I'm tasked with starting a new program for those that already have an undergraduate degree but want to upskill into data analytics. So I'm looking for some understanding of some core skills that the industry is looking for someone who wants to retool and take on a role in data analytics.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary. Thanks, everybody. I mean, we'll get to questions with everyone as we go on. But Mary just left us with exactly the topic of this panel, which is what are the skills that are required out there, and how do you set it up? And so, Dane, let me start with you. Sure. What do you think is the deficit out there? What are we trying to fix this morning that needs attention? And you're with the Business Roundtable, and you're trying to sort of raise the profile and raise the prominence of this particular agenda item. Why does it matter?
Well, first of all, hashtag BLS. That's a good one. Much shorter. But let me first say thank you for the opportunity to be on the panel. And I think for those of you that don't know Business Roundtable, we're a CEO organization. Our companies represent $6 trillion in revenue and invest $80 million in training. Why is this an important issue for the Business Roundtable and CEOs? In large part because, as many of you have heard, we have these 5.5 million jobs that we can't fill. And I would say from a recent survey that the Business Roundtable did of their members, we have 2 fundamental problems. One are, no surprise, some of the hard skills. And yes, reading and mathematics are a fundamental problem that we're seeing even with undergraduates, but we're seeing a more fundamental problem in the preparation of undergraduates and high school students who don't have some of the basic STEM skills. And by STEM skills, I don't mean a STEM degree or a STEM diploma. I mean, I'm talking about fundamental science, technology, engineering, math skills. But
let me just ask you a quick question about that, Dane.
Yeah.
I have heard that comment about STEM skills probably for 30 years. When you come up here to imagine a panel 20 years ago, that same statement might have been made. And so if that's true, why do you think we're so poor at correcting the problem? What is the gap that needs to be filled there?
Well, I think what you would hear from some of our members is that, and I won't start by pointing the finger at others, I think we've not done a particularly...
Don't point it at IBM and GE, please.
We'll point back.
They're members. I'm not going to point a finger at my members. But one of the problems is that industry hasn't done a particularly good job of sending clear demand signals. What are the competencies they need in the employees that they're trying to recruit? So I think that's one of the purposes behind the survey and all the other work that we're doing, not just among ourselves,
Right.
but with community colleges, high schools, four-year colleges and universities, to send clear demand signals on what are the skills, very specifically, that we need in industry so that we're not remediating all the time. But beyond the hard skills, I think one of the bigger problems that you hear our members talk about are what some might call the soft skills. We call the attributes. I mean, the ability to think critically, the ability to problem solve, and the ability to write well. I mean, those are some of the bigger challenges. And some of our CEOs would say, if you're not quite up to snuff on the hard skills, we can get you there and teach you the GE way. But it's more difficult to get you up to speed if you're not open to working with others and taking a leadership role on a project. So I think those are some of the challenges that our members face.
Tanya, how many employees do you have?
400,000.
So you're responsible internally, not only for the continuing education, but also kind of bringing in, I mean, if there was a data science center in the world, it would be IBM. Maybe Marco will dispute that in a moment. But when you're going out both to hire in workers, to attract workers into this area, you're out there and have feelers all over for the best talent you can sort of look at in the country, but you're also trying to reskill and deal with how you up the game for people that are in-house. I've been reading both about IBM and companies like AT&T and GE have the same challenges. So what's on your dashboard that you think, because I'm interested in where people are here and they want to hear how we fix a problem.
Right.
So how do you fix the problem?
And so we're really taking a couple-prong approach. And the first approach is to look at that external workforce. And this really connects with what you were saying, Dane, around we have to do, as an ecosystem, as a economy, a better job of preparing the people that are coming out of college, or even the people that aren't college-type people for whatever reason. Maybe they go to community college, or maybe college isn't their thing. But what we're really looking for is trying to help people gain the skills that they need to be able to have a profession in IT. And so many of those skills that Dane mentioned around those harder skills, which are fairly easy to teach, and those softer skills. So are you inquisitive? Can you critically problem solve? Can you work with teams? Are you innovative? So we're developing new collar programs to really change employment. Bring people in, that are not you wouldn't typically consider for a role in IT, but that have been very successful. And I have a couple examples I can share. The other piece of that is upskilling our current workforce. So more and more, we're seeing the talent market change. So I think all of you, and I'm sure you would concur with this, it's harder and harder to get the skills that we need. And so going out into the market is one way to do it, but we're really starting to look at our build versus buy strategy. And we, as well as many other companies, are focusing more heavily on making sure that we're investing in our current workforce and upskilling them. And we're using digital credentials to do that. So if you're not familiar with digital credentials, it's really a way to signal to the workforce and to people coming into the workforce the skills that are most valued by IBM and, more importantly, by our clients. And that really helps people to understand this is the type of skills
Tanya,
you would
where
need
is
to grow.
that? Like if somebody's interested in sort of chasing down what digital credentials
Yep.
have greater returns than others,
Yep.
where do they go find that? Do they go to IBM.com and
So
there's a little hat,
we have it on our website.
Really?
And in the
I
past,
didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, I won't fault you for that.
Yeah.
We have it on our website, and we're not the only company doing it. So I would suggest that we're leading the way, but Microsoft is doing it, and we're seeing it in community colleges that are starting to offer these for credit. Penn State, so everything from Penn State to community colleges are starting to really do a better job of signaling to the workforce the skills that you need.
So I want to jump to Marco for a second, and all of you, and feel free to jump on this. But so let me ask the cynical, mean question. Is there just sort of a temporary gap and a deficit on this sort of data skill sets gap that is going to be filled by Watson and filled by AI, artificial intelligence, and that we're going to fill it with automation and other capacity down the road. But we temporarily need people, so you seduce them into this track. But like I mean, because the Atlantic did programs all around the country on kind of the revival of manufacturing, new community partnerships, what was happening, and you would meet a kind of former generation of people who weren't thrilled that their children were being asked to go to manufacturing because they felt like it was a false promise. And so I'm just interested in the false promise dimension, whether there is anything in that with this, that because there is such a deficit, machines will eventually fill it. So tell me where I'm wrong, as Rachel Maddow would say.
So
She says it less and less, by the way. Just go ahead.
I think from my perspective, will automation help to really reduce some of the workload? Absolutely. But what we have found is we have introduced more and more cognitive functions within our workforce solutions. And whether that's, how many people in demand roles, how do we compensate them, how do we do proactive retention, and it's using analytics underneath that.
Right.
But what we have found is if you rely solely on the data and not have that human interaction, that human intervention to confirm that your data is accurate, you're missing a huge piece of success. So I don't think it's a false hope.
Marco?
Yeah, what's your perspective?
Yes, let me take this on as well as the issue of why are we not doing a better job at signaling the skills we need. But first, let me extend my apologies to the BLS, because if your website ever crashes, that's me, and I apologize. I want to apologize. But I don't think it's a temporary need, because what is happening now is not just an acceleration in artificial intelligence and computing. It's the coming together of digital and industrial. So what you need to get is a new set of skills that combine industrial capabilities with digital data analysis, data science capabilities, and those will always be needed. So the jobs that are being created in manufacturing are not just a filler for the time when artificial intelligence will take a big piece of it. They are new jobs which combine both skills. I mean, two pieces of evidence on this. One is at GE, we are probably at the forefront of introducing these digital technologies into the industrial world. And over the last 8 years, we've created close to 20,000 new jobs. So we're not replacing people with machines. The other part is, which connects with the question
So
of...
let me stop. So 20,000 new jobs in the scheme of GE or global affairs is so tiny.
No,
with all due respect,
it's not. 20,000 new jobs in the US, where we have a footprint of just over 100,000 people. It's not small peanuts at all. Especially in the current environment of relatively muted job growth. If you look at the big picture, by the way, in the US, we now have 5.5 million jobs more than at the peak of employment before the crisis. So all the hype about technology already destroying jobs, I think, is overhyped, which doesn't mean we shouldn't be worried about the transition and how we signal the need for the right skills. On that, I think part of the reason why we have, as companies, we have difficulties in signaling what skills do we need is that technology is changing fast. So companies themselves need to understand how the jobs are changing and how we have to rebuild the new skills. And part of it needs to be done in-house. So today, for example, we're announcing a new program of brilliant learning, where essentially what we're saying is, starting with supply chain and then extending it to most of our workforce, we're going to bring new levels of training to our people. Some of it is going to be through online courses, some of it through 2-3-day programs of hands-on training.
Do you do this internally, or do you contract with like Coursera or something like that?
We're going to do this internally, because it's also going to be very focused on hands-on experience, where you come in from the factory floor and we give you the tools, the 3D printers, the various digital tools which are coming into the factory, and train you on that. And then we're going to bring in external experts to stress test our experience and help us figure out how to do it better. And we're partnering with universities and community colleges to strengthen the link.
So hold that thought. Is it Mary I was talking to? Is it Mary? Yeah, Mary. So Mary was asking, really the question about the bridge, what sorts of, crystal ball future do you see that can be connected with the university so that they can better track that? And that's in part what part of the next conversation is, but all of you are on business. You're on the demand side of this. She's on part of the supply side. Yeah. And I'm interested, if you were to have, infinite power, what would be the elements that you'd like to fix in that connectivity between those that are providing, Brian and Mary, that are providing young people going into this area, and then the kind of corporate scene and those that are hiring and creating? What are the pieces that need to be fixed?
I would just do
Dane?
more on-hands cooperation. So as we are doing with some of the community colleges, we're doing it with Purdue University. We have joint programs where we have students and some of our scientists and engineers.
Is this sort of like a guild approach?
It's kind of a guild approach. It's kind of a replacement apprenticeship program where you combine studying with factory work. And you do it together. You develop products together, and you figure out together the new skills which are needed, because we see some of it, but we don't have the same lens that educators and students will have. So if we can work together, they will see things that we don't. And I think together, this is how you create the best curriculum and also the best link between the schooling side and the training side.
Dane?
I think it's interesting because of the shortage, which many predict in the next 10 years will go from 5.5 million to 11 million.
Right.
That you're seeing much stronger partnerships between the supply side and the demand side.
Absolutely.
I mean, GE is yet one example, but if you look at SAS, a data analytics company down in North Carolina, they have worked with a number of colleges and universities around the country to create undergraduate and graduate curriculums in data analytics. I would argue that SAS is a very good example of trying to replicate a model at scale. So rather than trickling out 30 graduates here or 30 graduates there, in a field where there is such significant demand, they're producing thousands of students. But you also can look at the work that Northrop Grumman is doing in cybersecurity out at College Park. And helping, and Northrop Grumman hasn't just cut a check. Northrop Grumman has sent executives in to actually help define what the curriculum is. And that helps ensure, I think, on the supply side, the students, that when they actually start to interview and get hired, that they aren't in the remedial courses, that the resume didn't just look good, but they actually have the competencies to succeed in the workplace. So I think there are lots and lots of examples from BRT members that are trying to actually create the partnerships to engage directly in curriculum, provide real-world case studies that are embedded in the curriculum, to provide not just internships, but meaningful work-based learning opportunities.
Right.
Because if you look at some of our companies, the internships and the apprenticeships are happening much earlier. I don't know about IBM and GE, but if you get hired as an intern in the summer of your sophomore year, you're asked to come back in the junior year. And at the end of your
Dane,
junior
with all
year,
due
you get
respect,
hired.
I mean, this all sounds great, but I think that one of the interesting challenges is how do you get more? Because a lot of this is talking about what everyone's doing proactively now, right? You've got internships, opportunities, working with colleges and universities. But what really, I think, is driving the conversation today is that even with that, we're projecting enormous deficits. And it reminds me when Intel Corporation invested and put a big chip plant into Rio Rancho, New Mexico. One of the things that they tested is whether they could get the pipeline of talent that could come in, and it was on the edge. I mean, it was really uncertain. So they made major investments in UNM and New Mexico State University and various community colleges because you had to get an ecosystem of talent. Other companies came in as well and began doing that. And so they had to kind of take ownership of an enormous number of things far beyond their business and change the ecosystem and culture there. And even so, I guess what I would like to challenge you, Tanya and Dane and Marco, is what can fill the deficit really beyond the things that are going on now. And I know that's a big lift, but we're here to talk about big lifts. So what changes the incentive structure for a young person to decide to go take Brian's course? He looks like a cool guy, but he might want to go the lawyer track instead. Or how do you change the incentive structure so that more people say data science is the right track for them? Tanya?
So I have a couple thoughts on that.
And do you agree with the premise?
I do, and I think that it's a couple of things. I think it's the ecosystem, the supply and demand coming together to recognize that collectively we have a shortfall and that collectively we have to solve it. So we have an education program that's been very consistent with New York Public School called P-TECH. And we've learned a lot through that, where we're educating some of the high school students. They're coming in and getting apprentices with us. Other companies have these programs. The challenge is I think we need to do that at scale, which is going to require very, very different relationship with the supply and the demand side. I think the other thing that we have to think about is that some people are just naturally interested in STEM. But let's be honest, a lot aren't. So when you talk to them about go take that course, they're like, eh. I think we really have to rethink how we're selling these courses to people. So when you talk to young people, they want to be a rapper. They want to be in fashion. They want to, and the thing is though, you can teach them core STEM skills talking to them in that language. So, okay, come on, let's show you how you can leverage this and how you can use coding and just basic project management to do that. So I think some of it is also shifting how we're presenting this to them and the curriculum and connecting it to what we need as a business.
But I think it's not just data science, because if you think of the big lift of filling this projected gap in jobs, which by the way is going to get worse because when we look at our industries, whether it's oil and gas or transportation, we have an aging workforce which is about to retire, and there is no pipeline of skills ready to fill it. What you also need is a pipeline of people with traditional factory work skills like welding, combined with some familiarity with iPads and computers, which today everybody has. And I think the big gap that we have to fill is that of vocational education in between high school and college. And you can fill it with formal courses, you can fill it with a more flexible structure, but that is the missing gap because...
Marco, I mean, you have this fantastic Oklahoma accent, but I do know you know about the world. When you look at all GE's operations around the world, is there anywhere else that's getting it right and that the United States could learn from, given your profound international exposure?
I think the best example is Germany, because in Germany, factory skills and industrial skills are extremely highly regarded. There is a strong connection between schools and the world of industry, and people want to do those jobs because they know they're good jobs, they pay well, and the skills gap is much smaller than it is here.
Dane, before I go to the audience...
Before you ask another question, actually, let me take over the role as moderator. So there are 2 points I want to make. One is career technical education. I mean, we need to do a better job of using real-time labor market data and looking at that data and figuring out whether or not the programs in those career technical centers are providing opportunities to build that pipeline. We have, in my opinion, too many cosmetology and food preparation courses in those career technical centers. The second issue that I haven't heard us talk about...
Is there a good clearinghouse for that information?
There is not. I mean, there's some national associations that are doing some good work in this area. Some of the recent investments that JP Chase has been making, I think, have promise in states and cities around the country. But the second point is, as we talk about building the pipeline, we shouldn't limit our thinking to the high school students. There are a number of dislocated workers out there who are looking to rebuild their skills and get back into the workforce. And they're not all 60 years old. And I think as we think about filling this gap, we're not going to fill the gap with the high school students. We need to fill the gap with the high school students and the individuals that are trying to get back in.
We even have a couple of really cool examples of that. A gentleman that was a fast food worker, and he took a Cisco certification. He's now employed with IBM in Houston. There was a woman who was a teacher and decided that she really wanted to do something different. You know, and she's now a cybersecurity specialist with us. So I think your point's very well taken on that.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And you want to stay and moderate the next session? Let me open up to the floor now. We've got a question right up here. Do we have a microphone? Emma will give you the mic.
Stand up and say your name.
And tell us who you are.
I'm Joe Reddix. I'm in IT program management. One of the things we've been working on with the federal government is the mobility services team. Mobility is key to integrating massive amounts of information to the public. And since a lot of our cultures are heavy into things like cell phones and things like that and tablets, watch. The idea of being able to solve your acquisition problem for new resources, the ability to gauge how well your strategy is working in education and things like that, and to find out what works and what doesn't work.
Right.
My question is this: when the federal government does things right, how important do you believe or feel the private sector has as an obligation to work with them? In other words, the mobility services team, for example, is mobility across all federal government. It touches everything that you guys have been talking about in the last few minutes, okay?
Great. Dane, thoughts, reactions, since you run the biggest association on the private sector side? So when the government gets something right, what's your obligation to bring your folks in?
First of all, I run nothing. I think we have an obligation, I think we have an obligation on the front end as well. And to help, in some cases, to instigate. So I think one of the issues I would put on the table is, trying to encourage, actually more than encourage, the use of this Pell surplus and get summer Pell, workforce Pell, so that individuals can extend the use, have a financial incentive to extend their course of study and beyond 2 semesters and get into the workforce more quickly. And we need to nudge Congress in this case to move fast on these 2 issues that I think have bipartisan support. But we also need a bigger term agenda. We don't need to fix just the problem we have today. We need a long-term solution as a country. And I think that's where we have a responsibility, and many of our CEOs are engaged with the administration, not just the White House, but with Congress, to figure out how are we going to work together on the development of these ideas, but most importantly, how are we going to work together to implement them and implement them at scale?
Tanya, do you and Marco have 30 seconds each on this?
So what I would say is we really believe that new collar jobs, so people that are coming out of untraditional backgrounds, whatever they are, is a new model of employment. And I think in order to make that work, we have to partner with the federal government. We have to better partner with education. And I think it's also city and local government too, because when you think about some of those internship programs, et cetera, a lot of that happens at the local level. So I really do believe it's an ecosystem.
Right.
I would just second the last statement that Tanya made, which is I think the cooperation with government overall is extremely important. At the local level, it is especially important because that's where you make a big difference and you can experiment.
Right.
I have a question. You're right here in the middle.
Hi, Luann McNabb. I'm with the National Council of Teachers of English.
Oh, great.
And I understand writing skills are important in speaking. Can you address, are you working with departments and faculty or high school teachers of English in what you're doing?
So I think in our perspective, we are, but I think we have an opportunity to have those closer partnerships. So in our P-Tech program, we're working within the school to understand what skills they have, what skills they don't, and where there are gaps. And like Dane said, it's not all technical skills. We find that we can teach those skills. It's really more of the behaviors and the softer skills that we find, customer service, those types of things are things that we need to do.
It's the package.
Yep.
Right.
So yes, but I think we have an opportunity to do more.
I think one of the things, just, if we had more time, it'd be interesting, is that because there is a movement that says, just like English is sort of the bloodline of communication, whatnot, maybe coding and other kind of STEM-related activity need to be taught on the same level. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that, whether you look at that as something you welcome or something that looks as a challenge. I think it's one of the most interesting questions out there. Yes, right here on the corner.
Aida Awad, Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellow. And you mentioned the fact that you thought there was a disconnect between the types of courses being offered in CTE programs and what the workforce really needs. And I would suggest that there's a need for upscaling those teachers as well and their skills. And I'm wondering what your suggestions and thoughts are about doing that.
Boy, she hit the hot button. Okay. What do you think, Marco?
So again, I think the first step of the solution for upskilling the teachers is bringing the teachers into the factory floors, into the different environments of the economy, so not just manufacturing, not just the factory floors. The second part is leveraging technologies to make sure that teachers can be more interactive, more effective with the students, but also can keep themselves up to speed. I was saying earlier that it's tough even within industries to keep up with the innovation. I think the link is needed so that teachers and industrialists and everybody else can constantly learn. So constant learning is for all of us, not just for the
Ryan,
workers.
Mary, have you visited factory floors and done what he said? You want to? You want to get his? You want to visit a
She said
GE
no.
plant? Mary, yeah? You've done it?
I have not done it, but would be interested.
There you go. You've got, you know,
Call me.
are you open to that?
Definitely.
Good.
Yes.
Be interesting.
That's what we do at the Atlantic. We broker relationships.
I think your point is well taken, though. Let's remember that it's not just, and I don't think you meant this, but it's not just the teachers who are currently in the workforce, but how, as part of their pre-service, their teacher preparation programs, that we're giving them the opportunities to go to NASA and work with the scientists. So there are lots of boutique examples of innovation, but we need to scale those
Right,
up.
Tanya, last word.
So I think we have a huge opportunity here. I think it's a partnership, but if I think about the impact that we can make for people that wouldn't have these opportunities otherwise, I think we can impact people and families on a very personal level and our economy on an even more broad level.
Let me thank Dane Linn of the Business Roundtable, Tanya Moore of IBM, and Marco Annunziata of GE and Oklahoma. Thank you guys very much for joining us.